Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lindsay Brown from Beyond Clean. Thank you for joining us today for this Vendor Spotlight webinar. In the last year, we have seen more rapid changes to the healthcare industry than ever before. The pandemic has placed a strain on key supplies, caused shortages of masks and PPE used to keep our healthcare workers like you safe. And this has actually created a domino effect in other areas, including the availability of blue wrap to sterilize instrument sets. Many hospitals today use a mix of both blue wrap and rigid sterile containers. For you, is this wrap shortage causing you to rethink your instrument container options? In a time of urgency, it's important not to introduce unnecessary stress into your facility. And today's Vendor Spotlight webinar shines the spotlight on Aesculap. Aesculap offers a broad product offering, local support, and world-class supply to help hospitals complete the conversion to containers quickly, to minimize the impact of surgical caseload that will ultimately help you operate with greater precision. Joining me for today's discussion, Staying Calm Through Chaos, is Troy Scroggins, Matt Lingenfelter, and David Ortiz. Matt Lingenfelter leads a diverse team of healthcare solution sales reps across the Northeast that strives to help customers maintain best practice to protect the patient. David Ortiz is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who has 23 years of healthcare experience, beginning as a surge tech, then a laparoscopic coordinator, and later transitioning to healthcare sales. And Troy Scroggins is with us today as well. Troy is the product manager for sterile packaging for Aesculap. I am so excited to get into this discussion. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the virtual event, Troy, Matt, and David.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Matt, David, and I would like to discuss today how Aesculap containers can help you stay calm during the blue wrap shortage. In the last year, more changes have happened in facilities and in healthcare than any other time. This has caused a huge amount of stress for the people who run the facilities, work in the facilities. Everyone's touched by it. In addition to the stress is the additional PPE, the shortage of PPE. Over 80% of the gowns today are manufactured, are disposable. So this has caused a kind of a domino effect, really taking those similar raw materials and having an effect on blue wrap. Today facilities, either use blue wrap or containers to process their sets. And with the shortage of blue wrap, it really can impact your caseload. So what we want to do is, just remind people to stay calm during this, stressful times, and really look at Aesculap containers. You're already familiar with Aesculap containers. Many of the facilities already have them or are familiar with how to use them. And, the big thing is that we have a broad product line. We have local support that really can come in and help you guys, convert the rest of your sets that you're having shortages of blue wrap to containers. The biggest thing is that the impact financially of COVID has been huge on facilities. And even with the smooth rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines, it's still estimated by the American Hospital Association that 39% of facilities will see a negative income in 2021 and being down over 10% from pre-COVID times. So this is very stressful for people. And, I think Matt can kind of talk about this more. Matt, works closely with our customers on a daily basis, and he can really talk about how it's affecting them and what he's seeing from his side.
I would say a year ago today, right, as we're a little past our 1-year anniversary into this fun pandemic, surgery stopped on the East Coast. So at that time, PPE was an issue, but it was not a concern at that point in time, even though facilities were trying to find the amount of PPE they needed for other areas of the hospital, not sterile processing. And then in the fall, we kind of came into round two, right? October, November, December, round two hit the U.S. Surgery once again went down. So as I see on a lot of the East Coast, I would probably characterize right now as we head into the spring season, surgery is now back. Surgery in most cases is above 100% of capacity right now in their operating room. evenings, nights, weekends for non-trauma centers are happening. So you're seeing a explosion, if you will, of surgical volume. So this is crippling the blue wrap even more because week to week, we're seeing a difference in what's available. So if one week a 24 by 24 wrap is available, the next week a 48 by 48 is not available. So we're constantly in this struggle. If we're already stressed out in the department because surgical volume is increased, the constant week by week cycle that we're in of not having the available sizes we need is creating a major burnout, creating a major stress on the department, creating a major burnout and stress on the employees. As administration looks, like as you mentioned, Troy, revenue's down. This is the first time 5 recessions, revenue's down. So surgery, what's that do? Brings in revenue to the hospital. So they're trying to look for ways to constantly increase that surgical volume and in a lot of cases move it out to the outpatient market. So not only are hospitals struggling with this, but as the surgical volume in an outpatient setting increases, the surgery centers are now being crippled with a blue wrap shortage due to the fact that they never needed this amount of blue wrap in the past. So, all those factors are definitely creating a domino, and the domino is not slowing down. And I guess I would ask David, from your experience, you travel a lot of the country. What are you seeing in that capacity right now?
Yeah, so we're seeing the same thing, Matt. It's not just on the East Coast, but as you mentioned, I go coast to coast. I'm all over. So I have seen that in other facilities. The shortage of a certain size leads a single facility to borrow from a sister facility or another hospital in the IDN or the network, what have you. But even that kind of system of loaning out, even that's getting tight because there's such a shortage. It's becoming critical, really, and it's just a snowball effect, if you will. So that's what I'm seeing, and I've seen that just as much on the West Coast as you see it on the East Coast.
Yeah, and with that, I think the big thing is that being able to take those sets and really convert them into containers and containerize all these sets really can help solve that problem and ease that stress for customers. It helps keep the cases on time, helps reduce the over long-term costs for the customer. Most people listening are very familiar with our products, know how to use Aesculap containers. By standardizing on our containers, it really can make the stress kind of level go down because if they know the process, they know how to use them, as well as the support and everything we offer, for those. I think if you look at it, which sets have you found have generally been wrapped more, as you kind of go in facilities? Is it more the ortho and spine, or is there other certain sets that are always wrapped currently today?
I think one of the major ones is your vendor trays. Those are the ones that either are consigned inventory or move in and out of the hospital daily, week by week, right? Depending on the surgeon, the vendor, in a capacity. So that's a very large one. I still find also a lot of sterile equipment. So in your scopes, your cameras, those are items that usually are ordered with a case, right? The plastic cases or what have you, materials that might come from another vendor. Those are probably the major ones that I see out in the market.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Ortho and spine is still a big thing too. Ringed instruments is still big in those two areas in ortho and spine, but I think I agree with you, Matt. The vendor trays are far and away the largest piece of that, and they just, some of those are very big, very heavy sets, so it takes that 2-ply, the very toughest blue wrap that these manufacturers are putting out to wrap those sets. So yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah.
Very true.
It's one thing it's important to note is that, Aesculap works with a lot of these manufacturers when they're doing the validations on their, their sets, and so they use and reference Aesculap containers a lot. So, in addition to that, being referenced in IFUs, I think, one of the other important things is the the work that our field does when they're helping you convert the sets. So if you can kind of talk about how you guys, can help a customer so they have all these ortho sets, how do they really get those sets into containers?
Yeah, so I mean, very simple process, right? This is all kind of on our local representation level of the Aesculap sales folks that we have across the United States, even into Canada, right? Into the Central Americas as we have local representation. So we're a global company that covers the world to do this process, and we all do it the same. So it's as easy as contacting your sales rep, having your sales rep come in. It's a free process. We basically go row by row, set by set, looking at each tray, either printing out your inventory from your tracking system or handwriting the actual names down. So we know at a micro level what each individual tray goes into, right? What Aesculap container is denoted for what each individual tray. So after we do that, we count that up. Within about 48 hours, we can come back with a complete cost of that structure, as well as financing options as we kind of look into how we can help people get out from the burden of capital.
Yep. And I think it's important to note, too, we can do that in several different ways. We can go after the entire instrument fleet, if you will, all of the sets that you have in Blue Wrap. Or we can, do it piece by piece, essentially targeting those sets that are the highest turn, right? What you're going to be spending the most on in terms of wrap. So we can target those first. It's all about priorities and how that specific facility wants to attack the problem. So we can assist with any of those methods.
Custom solution for each individual customer. Yeah. And I think that that's key, what you said, Matt, is that really, if you look at the process of converting, it's very simple. Our reps come in and we really just help you identify those sets and determine the sizing. And then the other key thing is that once you've, placed the order with that, we actually come in and help you implement it. And I think that's one key difference that Aesculap has is that, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of stress going on. So now introducing how do you bring in another 100 containers or something and bring them through the process and all, those are things that our team will help implement, so.
Yeah, that's a really solid point you bring up, Troy. I mean, as I look at, where I kind of cover in the sales rep I work with across the U.S., I am unboxing containers with people. And I am helping to implement these things. It's our service. It's our product. We want to make sure we help you through the process.
Our service doesn't stop with the sale, basically. Until the customer is comfortable, then that's when.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing, too, that's important to talk about is really what are the conversion best practices. If we look at this, there's a lot of, even though people should be doing this on an ongoing basis, when they're kind of faced with this on a big scale, maybe it's a little overwhelming. And, I think it's kind of a fairly straightforward process. It should be a lot of things that people already know. But, that's the other thing, too, is that we can help them out with that, and, the one thing, of course, is just, understanding the industry guidelines, the ARN, ISHM, AMI guidelines, and understand what they outline and how they outline how you should verify, as well as, as we're talking about vendor sets, making sure you're looking at their IFUs versus, the IFUs of the sterilizers and the IFUs of the containers to make sure that they match up, and really understanding that, like, Matt before mentioned, a lot of low temp, scopes and stuff, some of those cycles, have limitations, that aren't 25 pounds. So it's really knowing those types of information is this key, for simple conversion. And then also as you kind of look at, how you verify into your system of what is the dry time or how do you set the dry time is really making sure you ensure you reach the end result identified in that instrument IFU, The other thing too is, I think, David, you probably see, you just the work you do and the surgical asset management, you probably see people's policies more and how they apply to this. Do you have any insight on making sure how the policies are written and understood for conversions?
Yeah, I think, what I've seen each facility writing their own policy. Sure, there's a lot of similarities. But there's no one answer for all vendor sets. It just doesn't happen. And, we've seen that in looking at different IFUs. So it really comes down to that facility, that specific hospital, as to how they're going to treat that, in terms of each vendor. So, but yeah, to your point, I would highly encourage everyone to look at the individual sets, the individual manufacturers, vendors, look at their IFU, and then have a policy for testing those sets in a container.
The other thing is, in addition to, of course, helping people get back on track with their surgical sets, there's many different reasons to convert to containers in addition to, the shortage of blue wrap. And most customers are aware of these, but, when you really look at the long service life that a container can provide, the cost savings with the reduction of, of supplies. Of course, there's no delays related to holes in them. And then when you kind of get through the processing too, you get the ability to stack better in the sterilizer and stack better in storage and transportation. I think those are all key things to point out too that can really help out customers and, to increase their throughput, as kind of Matt was talking about, as you're above this higher level of surgeries that you're trying to accomplish right now.
Yeah, it's really an all-inclusive solution. It takes care of a lot of things in one fell swoop, right? Any issues with holes in wrapper, it takes care of that. Assembly, the point of assembly in SPD, it could potentially speed up the assembly, make you more efficient. There's a lot less disposable cost to it. There are a lot of advantages to it, and we'll call it the all-inclusive solution a lot more during this presentation, because it really is.
And I think the other component of all of this is a container protects your instrument from damage, right? There are instrument organization systems that Aesculap has that can protect your instruments. So imagine instruments like keratins, osteotomes, curettes, micro instruments, eyes. All of these categories of instruments are things that every day, bipolars, right, get damaged, but when they get the point of use in the OR. Containers also help protect the investment that is made on that instrumentation. If I had a $1,000 scope in my department, I would want to make sure it's protected. So it's something that's also very key, right? When you're looking at your container system, is how can I also protect the investment that I made in my department to have this instrumentation?
It's a very good point. When you look at the cost of the organizational systems, and then weigh that out against the cost of a repair, you will clearly see that it's well worth the investment in protecting your asset, basically. And a scope that's a beautiful example, because I know we've all done it, right? We've opened a micro tray or a neuro tray with bipolars, very fine tipped instruments, and it's a nail biter. You open it up and things are up against the corners or, bent. You've got heavy items with delicate items. So the organizational system takes care of that, separates those items and protects that investment, protects those instruments. So I think that's just as crucial, and that's a huge partner to the container, if you will.
Key to note about that too is that, as you get those sets that may need organization, Aesculap can come in and help you organize them too. Our team, again, will help the the facilities look at those sets, figure out how to organize them. The other thing too is we're doing the layout helps really identify, if there's different sizes or anything. So when they're doing the SPD, setting it up, they can lay it out and say, okay, wait, I noticed I'm missing a size. Or when it gets to the OR, if they're going from size, 7 to size 8 in something, they can, the scrub nurse can find that easily. So it makes everything a lot more efficient, both in the OR as well as reducing the costs.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Troy. This isn't just local to SPD or to sterile processing. This affects the OR as well. This makes them faster and better as well. It has a huge effect there.
Other thing, we kind of talked about, kind of at a high level is really, the standardization. By choosing Aesculap over other container brands, our reprocessing supplies, are really inexpensive. So for less than $1, you can reprocess your container. The other thing, too, is by standardizing one brand, you really can increase a lot of efficiencies. You have, one standard of practice, one standard of IFU. The SPD knows how to handle them. The OR knows how to handle them. And I think, that's one of the things that, in the surgical asset management world, David works on a lot. So if you can explain maybe more how this helps, increase that and make better patient safety or better opportunities for the facility.
Yeah, so a lot of work that I do is lean-based, right? It's standardization, it's reduction of errors or reduction of the opportunity for errors, right? And to have a standard container system does exactly that, okay? You've got, there isn't a big mix of disposables. If you can imagine, if you're assembling a tray and you have 6 or 7 different choices, you have that opportunity when you're working quickly, when you're being rushed, it's a quick turnover. There's a lot of opportunity for error there. So if you standardize things, for example, with the organizational system or with the container, you're going to reduce the opportunity for errors, okay? I think standardization is pretty basic term. I think it's not too difficult to see the benefits of it. So that's what we advocate, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. That's the biggest thing. It's just, creating that big smooth flow process. Making sure that there's not too many variables in there. So again, that helps reduce the stress. One of the things too is, when we talked about vendor sets is really making sure that, again, you streamline the process. And before this conversation, Matt, you and I were talking about it. And, one of the key things is that there's two ways to do vendor sets. Some facilities, may purchase them themselves so they can save the money and control the containers, and others may kind of put it down to the manufacturers to bring it in. So maybe if you can kind of walk through it. So, if you look at the side where vendors are bringing in the container or bringing in the sets and the facilities providing the containers, I know a lot of the worries is, well, if I provide the containers, I'm worried about them walking off with them or anything. I know you've worked with customers to help solve that problem. How did you guys address that?
Yeah, it can be done in a couple different ways where the easiest thing is to label the container property of, XYZ Hospital Corporation, right? That's the easiest way so that they know it's not going to leave their facility. Again, by having a strong policy of maybe when a vendor set comes through the washer, they're not automatically sterilizing it, depending on the policy of the hospital. Because many times they're automatically sterilizing the equipment, not putting it in the vendor room where it would go, where the driver or rep comes in to then take it right to their next destination to be used. So labeling is a very easy way. We can't have a small etch on our containers. In no way can we put the big bold letters, but having some kind of P-touch label or labeling on the side of the container denoting that it is property of a hospital, certainly one good way to do it. From a standpoint of vendors bringing containers in themselves and purchasing them for the hospital, it's very important when that's set up a couple key things need to take place. A lot of supply chain is putting letters out to their vendors stating if you want to bring a container or you want to bring a loaner tray in here, you must have it in a container. Going back to David's point about standardization, it's so important to say if you want to stick with Aesculap, it's important to bring it in an Aesculap container. Because if your hospital wants to standardize to one tray in terms of Aesculap containers, it's important the vendors do the same. Because if you do not, then you kind of implement and create a almost chaotic situation of 24 hours before a case not having processing supplies to manage whatever container system they denoted to bring in. Aesculap does work with pretty much all the major manufacturers out there in terms of purchasing containers directly from the company, as well as local distributorships can contact your sales rep in your facility to have them go hand in hand, do the sizing we talked about, produce a quote to that local distributorship, and then have them actually purchase the container.
That way, when you have the two options, either they're brought in outside of a container, and then there's a good drop-off point, goes through containerized, and then a good pickup point with no container, or the rep's bringing it in with the container, or the service is bringing it with the container and out. And again, keeping track of that very well.
Yeah, and I think one important note I forgot to mention, if your facility wants to establish a policy, in my experience, you have to get the chief of orthopedics on board. Many vendors are going back to their surgeons in the OR to state, I don't want to do this. They're trying to make me do this. I can't afford this. If your surgeons are on board with the mission that you want to do, which is help solve your blue wrap crisis, which helps the surgeon not have delays in his case, you will create a winning strategy to make sure that the vendor can bring the container in and will actually purchase it. Because sending a letter is great, but if you don't have support from your champions in the OR, it's going to fail.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is making sure that all the different touch points across the way are really, understand it, bought in, know the process, and again, I think, by working together and making sure if they do recommend that, products be brought in containers, that the OR also reinforces that you got to bring them in Aesculap containers, so that it's a standard of care. So when it gets to the OR, they know how to handle the product. They can keep the cases on time to make sure they keep the money coming in.
Yeah, it's not that hard to make that link. So I think cooperation would not be difficult, shouldn't be difficult anyways.
One other thing too is, if you kind of look at containers, the one question always is that if you look at wrap, it's a daily cost, where if you look at containers, it could be a capital expense. I think one of the key things is that, with Aesculap, we have a lot of options. So, if you want to purchase the containers, we have that. And when you purchase containers, because of the reduction in the cost of wrap, you do get a quick payback period between them. But then again, we have a lot of other options to help customers. So if you don't want to outright capital purchase it, we do have some financing, some fleet options. So, maybe if you guys could talk a little bit about, if you look at, when would it be a good opportunity to use financing, or would it be a good opportunity to use fleet?
So the couple key characteristics of those programs, right? As you look to which one would be the best for me, right? Obviously, a lot of folks are out there right now trying to get emergency capital, right? A lot of your facilities have contingency funds, emergency capital available for projects. I have seen in the last 2 months emergency capital becoming available due to the fact that there is a shortage. Straight financing is a second way to look at it. What Aesculap strives to do with Aesculap Financial Services, which is an in-house financing, is we understand the market and the climate that we're in. We understand that revenues are down. The goal is to make this as easy as possible. we want to look at what every month is your blue wrap spend. Because just like Troy mentioned, you're buying it every day. You're using it every day. It costs money every time you touch it. If we could look at that and say, hey, we have a financing option to make your payment the cost of your monthly blue wrap spend and get all the containers you need now. That is an easy process to do, and something that we can link up your finance managers with our folks. Because I think a lot of times it's even above my head sometimes, right? When we start talk financing, let's get business directors on the phone, right? Let's get supply chain business folks on the phone so that they can really talk with our finance folks to understand how they want to do it, leasing it, buying it, renting it. Like there's so many different options. We can also do payments where it may not come and hit till your next fiscal year. So there's so many options that kind of play in there that can overwhelm all of us when we just kind of want to start to figure out, how can I get this in my facility? So having that discussion between those is critical. And the last piece is the fleet. For a lot of us that are probably have more blue wrap, there's a lot of us out there that do have an immense amount of blue wrap. One really nice program that we implemented is called fleet management. Basics of fleet are that you're going to get all your containers that you need now for a monthly fee for a term of a contract, whatever term they determine to be between the two facilities. For the entire life of the contract, you're going to get the container repaired, serviced regularly, and replaced when it's needed to be replaced. So as David mentioned before, an all-inclusive, kind of container, fleet management is an all-inclusive program. Not only are we going to give you the container, we're also going to service the container. We're also going to replace the container. And another nice thing about that program, it can also be built to put the processing supplies in too. So your filters, your lock tags, your indicator cards also can be included in that program. So what's that do for your facility? You have a fixed cost every month for your container that does not change. You get everything you need, and then you have a fixed cost. Again, our goal, make it easy, make it as close as we can to that blue wrap payment, so you operationalize the entire deal, not having to go through a capital, not contingency funding, emergency funding. This really helps to even out, spread out that payment, and operationalize it for your folks.
Those are all very key points, is that, it's really, a lot of opportunity to work with each facility and each facility's needs. The other thing too is that, with the finance company, our finance company is they're very quick to respond. I think that's another key thing. And, in today's environment where, okay, I'm running out of blue wrap, I really need to make this purchase now. I think that quick turnaround time we have and that quick processing time, really can get those containers into the facilities right away. And then, of course, you guys can help them implement them right away so that they're up and running in a short period of time, being able to keep cases on schedule. The other thing, too, is you kind of talked before about the different sizes of blue wrap. And, that really leads to the biggest thing, is that there's such a wide variety of instrument sets, different sizes, different needs, when you look at containers, we have a wide option in containers so that we can find the container that fits that individual product. So that's one thing with working with Aesculap, is that, the wide variety of sizes, the fact that we have all modalities, FDA clearances, so that if you need to do some low temp or you need to do, steam, we have the abilities. We have some universal containers that can cover all those modalities, to really streamline your process again and, make it easy for both the SPD to process them and the OR to know what to expect when they're getting them. The other thing too, as you mentioned before, Matt, about, the weight of a lot of the vendor sets, with our containers, they are lighter. They're 15 to 20% lighter than a lot of the other containers. So that, allows for, more instruments, better set, larger number of sets to fit in those containers as well.
Yep, it's hugely important today. It's a good point, Troy. Yep.
In addition to, the containers, the other thing too is that, Aesculap really has the ability to come into facilities and, help you with that blue wrap shortage right away, like we said, between our large product selection and our service, but then there's a lot of other benefits we can bring to the team too, or to your facility too, is in like David has with the surgical asset management, team can come in and help you streamline your processes throughout. Is there anything else you want to kind of provide more detail about how your team works or what benefits your team can provide people?
Yeah, so we, it's kind of broad what we do. I think the biggest part in relation to containers is that standardization. We can look at all of the service lines or some specific service lines that have high volume, high turnover, where there's a lot of where sterile processing is playing a lot of catch up, maybe day to day. So we can come in and look at the processes. We can look at the sets and determine what's the best path or the best way to increase your efficiency and meet that demand really that's being placed on the OR today as we sort of play catch up, so to speak, after the pandemic. Or I know we're still in it, but as we hopefully get to the end of it, yeah. but so yeah, those are there's some very crucial. A lot of data can come out of that, out of looking at your processes and how you're putting through the sets and marrying that up to the demand. We do that in several different ways. We do pull some reports from tracking systems. We pull some reports from Epic that help us identify some of the places that we can look at and really go after in terms of increasing efficiency and reduction of errors, the whole standardization piece.
That's one key thing is like you said, in the current status of, being so many, overbooked cases at the moment, being back to back like that, the ability to reprocess sets in a timely manner so that you're not holding up cases. The SAM team really can come in and, like you say, look at those high movers and figure out, okay, how can we streamline these high movers and get the process so that they're always available? Yes, you can look at the whole picture, but by looking at those prime movers, it really makes the biggest impact immediately.
Yeah, so we look at the high moving sets and the busiest services and look at their effects on the overall OR volume. And so if there's any peaks or valleys, what we try to do is smooth that out to achieve then a pre-COVID level, if you will, of efficiency and work in the OR and the SPD. That's really one of the biggest points is that we compare the workload for both and see how they affect each other and see how to best improve processes, staffing, those kinds of things. We look at equipment as well. That's a big piece, and to include containers, really. So it's all tied together. And that's what we look at, essentially.
And I think from my side, I see the customer testimonials after these programs are completed, and the results are amazing. So, David, I appreciate you and your team for what they do, because you really do help move the needle.
And it's, we have some customers that it's a real eye-opener. When you start to marry the two up, OR and SPD and workloads, it's not that we're the only ones that can see these things. It's not a crystal ball or anything, but it's just no one, and especially now, very few people have the time to look at this stuff. So when we gather the data and we present the information, it's a real eye opener, and it's big dollars. I can tell you that.
I think two key things you said there is that, really, if you look at it, each facility may have a different bottleneck. Some may be the equipment, the sterilizers or the washers. Some may be, the processing through SPD, and others may be OR. Maybe it's, the where the ORs are located or the ability to get the sets down to decontam or something like that. Every facility is unique. I think that's one key thing to realize. And the other thing too is, the time to implement these changes really is pretty quick. I mean, that's, I think, one of the other thing too is you look at what the SAM team can do is that, okay, yeah, you can come in and present your analysis and show where these savings can be. But the biggest thing is that then you can turn around and implement it in a very short period of time. I mean, what does a normal, kind of engagement take, to implement?
Yeah, so, it kind of depends on what that facility is looking at and what their challenges are. We have engagements as short as 2 days and some that go weeks, months, just depending on the need. But I think one of the greatest advantages that we have is that after any engagement, the customer is going to have sort of a list, right? Short-term goals that are, they can implement very quickly, medium and long-term goals to achieve whatever or eliminate whatever challenge or roadblock they're facing. So there is a plan, and that's huge, because we've heard it from other facilities that they bring in maybe outside consultants, and it's a list, do this, do that. Well, but we develop a plan, and so we assign individuals to that plan. We check in. There's open lines of communication. Again, we don't just go in, look, and leave. There's service to this, and we don't just disconnect. If any questions, any concerns, we're more than happy to go back in and assist. So I think that's the biggest difference, is just having goals.
Yeah. And I think that's one key thing too, is, during this time, again, where they're reprocessing sets, quickly, some facilities could be concerned that their, immediate use might be needed, rate might increase because of these needed sets, but we can come in and do it properly and really, streamline the process. So there is, a minimum need for doing those immediate processing of sets.
Yeah, exactly. It starts with why. Why is there that need? So that's where we go. We find out why and address that.
Yeah, get to the root cause.
Exactly.
So, I think that the biggest thing is, if you look at everything we discussed, it's really important to know that, with the financial troubles that facilities are really having nowadays, and the blue wrap shortage and how that will impact surgeries, that, Aesculap is really here to assist customers and help them, take those sets, and containerize them, help them figure out how to protect them, and overall really keep their cases on time, as we kind of think about the overall picture and everything that we can do for customers. Is there any last, thoughts or inputs you guys have, related to customers and how we can help them, or things they should consider with the blue wrap shortage?
I'd say for myself, as I see customers weekly with my sales folks in the Northeast, this issue is not going away. I think that's a key factor. A lot of times we're so dependent on our storeroom folks to go out and source additional sources of wrap. If we don't have the right contract, if we don't have the right people in place, if we don't have the supplies, we cannot perform surgery. So the number one key thing for me is, week by week, this is an evolving problem, because as we talked earlier, it's size by size by size, and also by contract, right? So really, the time to act is before you have a problem, not the day the problem escalates. So as we've talked about our ease of coming in, looking at your inventory, and helping you find creative ways to fix the problem, and then have a better standardized process going forward for the future, that's what we're here to do as a company. And that's what we stand behind, knowing that our service is going to happen after the sale as well, that we're going to be there to support you through the entire process.
Yeah, Matt, that's a great point. Just recognize that it's the problem, like you said, it's not going away. Containers are a long-term solution. It solves many problems. It's not just tackling the shortage of blue wrap. It could potentially take care of a lot of issues and actually save a lot of money long-term and in the short term, really. So consider that, consider the service, and consider the solution.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is when you think about switching, is that like you guys said, Aesculap is really there to help people make that switch, make it quick, and really by standardizing on us, you create that flow and you create that expectation and really ease the stress that everyone has out there. Of okay, the caseloads are high, the shortage is high, and by using Aesculap containers, you really streamline that process. You keep your costs down, and you raise expectations of what the facilities can do. One of the key things too is to really just to move forward. It's very simple. Just contact your local Aesculap rep. If you're not familiar with who they are, or if you want to learn more about the wrap to rigid process, you can visit our website. It's aesculapusa.com/wrap to rigid. And that'll give you more information on the wrap to rigid process, or you can call our 800 number, to contact us right away.
Wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for leading us through that discussion. As we prepare for the live question and answer session of this discussion, I want to call all of your attention to the screen in front of you. On the upper right-hand corner of your screen, Aesculap has provided some downloadable resources and some links for you to access both today and into the future. As this panel discussion will be available on demand, you can access this session whenever you would like. You can share it with your colleagues and the decision makers at your facility. So certainly take advantage of those downloadable resources before you leave this session today. On the lower left, you will see a question and answer tool. What questions do you have for Troy, David, and Matt? I see many of you have already submitted questions, which we are about to get into, so feel free to submit those questions to the panel using that tool. All right, guys, without further ado, let's get to some of these really great questions that have come through. And Matt, I'm actually going to direct this first question your way. It says, I'm having issues trying to get vendors to comply with bringing in their own containers. How can we manage that? And do you have any suggestions to make it successful?
Yeah, Lindsay, thanks for asking that question. And I appreciate someone out there kind of coming into this very important process. It kind of starts with the orthopedic, the surgeons themselves and administration in the hospital getting behind this process. A lot of times we find the vendors going back to the surgeons kind of discussing, this is going to cost me money. I can't do this. Can you help me out? We don't need to go through this. So having a surgeon champion, as well as having some leadership champions in your facility to get behind this, to go to maybe the distributor principal, to go some of the management within the vendor systems you're using, can help it make it successful. Because just telling a rep, hey, next time you come in here and bring a container, we find 9 times out of 10 doesn't happen. So pretty much having that behind you can help. We certainly can get a hold of some successful letters that have been put into the market by other institutions to help. We can certainly do that, but that's your first step, right? Getting that help internally so that there's support from above to push the vendors to do this.
Okay, wonderful. And it looks like we've gotten a lot of great vendor questions. So I'm going to go right into the next one. It says, I believe the biggest challenge we face with containerizing our vendor and loaner trays are deciphering the IFUs to determine if we can place it in a container while reducing the weight of the tray. That may be having to place items in tray baskets, and that in itself is another debatable topic. Can you shed some light on the IFU situation when it comes to containerizing vendor and loaner trays?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of vendor systems out there that either denote Aesculap on the IFU itself or denote a rigid container system on the IFU itself. If neither of those two exist, in which there's 21 vendors today in which it does exist, then we look at a verification process. Earlier, David had mentioned talking about having a policy written inside the hospital. So it's so important to have a policy written about this inside the facility so that when a vendor tray comes in, that their IFU does not associate with a rigid container. You have a verification policy in-house where you're running a cycle with the BIs, testing it previously so that you're creating a good manufacturing process to know that the manufacturer IFU meets the same requirements as the container IFU. So having a policy written in-house helps. The second part of that question is really talking about if we have to remove items out of the vendor tray and putting it in a basket. I've seen that happen, specifically Stryker Mako. The Mako boot itself, I've seen where their container is too large to fit into an Aesculap container. The boot components are moved out, put in a basket to be used. I haven't seen too many concerns about the ability to do that or the question to do that in terms of an IFU, more so labeling. People have a lot of questions about labeling where maybe some knee sizers or something where each peg has a certain size. We can get as granular as having metal tags and putting sizes on there. So we can certainly find creative options. We have all the organization pieces to do so, but I find 9 times out of 10, we're able to put the manufacturer basket into our bottom.
All right, thank you. And since that question brought up a great topic about the actual weight of trays, I'm actually going to send this next question, more specific to the weight of trays, over to David. David, how would you counsel SPD departments who are converting to rigid containers in dealing with increased total sterilization load weights? Have you collaborated around leveraging tracking system technology to automate this, or do you have a manual tracking recommendation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question, because we know obviously any container that you use is going to be heavier than wrap, right? But the whole conversion to containers, it really represents a great opportunity to look at the contents of that set and make sure that everything in that set is actually needed or used for the procedures. So a lot of times what we can do is look into those sets and really look to pull things out that are not used or never used. And it's a pretty significant percentage of instruments that are never touched, really. So, and that's one of the methods that we can use to kind of leverage, you're going to gain weight on the container, but you can lose weight on the contents. So we can measure it out that way. In terms of the tracking system, yes, we've seen some programs where the container, pictures of the container can be placed into the tracking system. So at the point of assembly, that individual will know exactly what to use for that specific set and how to prepare it. There's pictures involved in some of these systems that leave no question as to what the set should look like and how it should be prepared for use, really. So I hope that answers the question.
Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. Yep. As a sterile processing tech myself, I rely heavily on a lot of the pictures within our tracking system. So I'm glad you brought that up. David, another question for you. I'm a huge fan of containerized processes, but in hospitals with space constraints, it could be an unmanageable conversion. Does Aesculap offer solutions to this challenge?
Yeah, so, obviously a container could potentially increase the space needed. We do want to remind everybody that our containers are stackable. Wrap, it's recommended to not stack it. Obviously, some of those sets are going to be very heavy. A lot of those things get dragged across shelves. Holes or tears appear. Keep in mind that containers will take care of that problem, and containers are stackable. So where you might lose some space, you're going to gain some space as well. So that's the key thing I wanted to remind everybody about on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. This next question I am going to send over to Troy. Troy, what is the shelf life on containers? Is it months? Is it indefinite? Can you shed some light on that subject?
Yeah, thank you. With that, if you look at our IFU, all of our testing is done to 360 days. So that's what our shelf life and our FDA claims are. A lot of facilities have, they look at event-related shelf life. So again, a lot of times what we've been talking about throughout this podcast is talking about policies. So if you have a facility, you really need to make a policy. Are you going to follow date-related or are you going to follow event-related? So that's the biggest thing. Our containers are tested to that long, based on everything we do, but then the facilities have to decide how they're going to apply that information.
All right, great. And can you speak a bit about what your IUSS validated container is like? How is it better than other types of IUSS containers? Any additional information that you can give on that subject?
Yeah, so if you look at IUSS, of course, everyone's trying to minimize that in their facilities. But the biggest thing is that if you have to use IUSS, is making sure that everyone understands, what that said is how it should be handled. Okay, so our JK containers, our solid body containers, do have IUSS clearances. So, anything you would put in there, you can, do immediate use with no dry time. The biggest thing is that we offer, yellow locks, yellow indicator cards, so that when that set leaves the SPD and goes up to the OR, if they see that, they know what to expect. Okay, so the big thing is that when it gets to the OR, if they see the yellow tags on it, they'd say, okay, if I open it, there could be moisture in here, and they expect that because they know there was no dry time. The other thing too is if the container got, taken to the OR, and then they decide they didn't need it at the end of the case, and they never opened it, the yellow tags or yellow markings on it will help identify that this should be taken apart at the end of the case and reprocessed properly.
Okay, wonderful. So the reason why we're having this discussion in general is because there's a blue wrap shortage, and Aesculap is well positioned to be a solution for facilities to turn to. Now, it's understandable that there are also some concerns, and this next question kind of addresses one of those. Is there any delay in getting containers because of this wrap shortage? Should we be worried about disposable filter shortage?
Yeah, so if you kind of take that as a two-part question, as far as the first part, Aesculap is the world's largest manufacturer of containers. So, our production is ramped up to provide that and get us the containers as fast as possible. So there's, very minimum time between your ordering and getting the products. As far as you look at the processing supplies, with that, the questions that our customers have been asking in the past is that, well, if there's a shortage of blue wrap, what are your filters? The filters that we use and everything are not in the same material that the blue wrap is. So it's not related. So the raw material for our filters and everything, our other processing supplies, is readily available. So as far as getting those supplies, it's not a problem. And we're working, of course, with our vendors very closely to make sure we have more than enough inventory of those.
Wonderful. Okay, so this next group of questions is going back to the vendor discussion, and I'm going to kind of combine these two and send it out to any of you three, actually. The first part of the question says, would a vendor tray need to have approval in the IFU to place inside of a container? The second part is, how do I find the 21 vendors that already have your container approval?
I can start with that one. So as far as when you look at the instrument manufacturers IFU, the big thing is that if you read through them, they'll state, may be wrapped or, can be wrapped or containerized. So a lot of times the verbiage in there is straightforward. There's only a handful of items or a handful of IFUs I've ever said that must be wrapped, where they truly just say, wrap is only acceptable. So, but everybody else, it's acceptable to go either way with that. As far as, getting a list of the vendors that we have worked with, if you work with your local Aesculap rep, they can provide the letter we have that kind of outlines the process for containerizing vendor sets and then provides a list of who we've worked with.
Thank you for providing that information. This next question I'm going to send over to Matt. Again, how long does it take to size my instrument fleet for containers?
Yeah, good question. Like we mentioned before, it's a pretty easy process. Certainly, either if I am working with the local rep or the local reps in the hospital, if you give us access to the sterile core or the shelf, wherever you're storing your sterile supplies, from there, we take it on. So we don't really need anyone from the department to ask questions unless it's more, hey, this cysto set, does it have obturators and cannulas, to try to understand how we're going to piece it together. So a standard, 8-room operating sterile processing department with your sterile core, we're probably talking 2-3 hours. So that's our local rep doing it themselves. So it's not really needed to have somebody with us. We're all vendor credentialed, can be in the facilities. So very easy process.
All right, wonderful. And Troy, I'm going to send this final question over to you. Does Aesculap reach out to major companies to offer Aesculap containers instead of making trays that need to be wrapped?
Yeah, so we do work with a lot of the major manufacturers for instruments. The other thing too is that all those companies work with independent people who build trays. So we work with both people. So with the people who are going to make the trays, the people who are making the instrument sets, so that they all know the measurements of our trays and can build accordingly to that. The other thing too is when the OrthoSpine or other companies are going to do their internal validations, we will help them, with the validations, providing containers so that they can get the validations in our containers as well.
All right, very good. Troy, Matt, David, thank you all so much for shedding light on a critical topic, very, very real topic for healthcare professionals today. I know one of the biggest goals is operating with greater precision. That is Aesculap's tagline. I think it's incredible. That's the goal for every healthcare facility. And I want to thank the three of you for sharing just how Aesculap can help hospitals complete the conversion to rigid sterilization containers quickly. That's the key word here, quickly, to minimize the impact of surgical caseload. To all of you who joined us for today's discussion, thank you for all that you do. I encourage you, if you do have questions about converting to rigid containers, on your screen you'll see the contact information. Reach out to Aesculap for more information. David, Troy, Matt, thank you all very, very much for this discussion today. I'm Lindsay Brown with Beyond Clean. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the week. And as always, I encourage you to keep fighting dirty. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you, everyone.